Hello everyone, I'm James Varty and I'm the Programme Manager for the PPN in the Midlands. Thanks very much for having us along at this event. I'm sorry that we can't be there in person, but today I'm going to give you an overview of the Psychological Professions Network and explain what we do, and then also tell you about the workforce expansion that's happening within the NHS in England and some of the new roles that have been created. Hopefully, most of you will have heard of the PPN and will be members, but if you aren't, please join. There's a link in the slide deck which will be shared afterwards, but the web address is simply ppn.nhs.uk. So, Psychological Professions Networks are commissioned by NHS England to provide a joined up voice for the profession. It's a free multi-professional network for anyone interested in psychological practice in the NHS, and our focus is on bringing together psychological professionals and other stakeholders simply to maximise the benefits of the profession to the public. And it's important at this point to recognise that the psychological professions have come an awfully long way in recent years. And it was only very recently in October 2022 that the NHS in England appointed a national clinical lead for the psychological professions, and that's Adrian Whittington. Adrian also leads the PPN nationally, but before that time, the psychological professions were essentially grouped within the allied health professions leadership structures. So Adrian's role has been really important in facilitating developments within the workforce, and it reflects the growing presence of the psychological professions that we have within the NHS. So the overarching function of the PPN is to inform, enable and influence NHS commissioned healthcare, and we do that through undertaking a range of activity. We engage and connect with psychological professionals, recognising that we have a stronger voice collectively. A lot of our work happens at a strategic level, but we are also very much involved in establishing and supporting communities of practice for different groups of psychological professionals to come together and learn and grow together as practitioners. So we have a number of communities of practice that I'll discuss in a later slide. And before I go any further into our work, I'm going to play a brief video.
There are all kinds of psychological professions in the UK, but they don't always speak as a group. And this means they can get pushed into the background. Mental health is essential to every part of our health and well-being. As the World Health Organization says, there's no health without mental health. That's why the Psychological Professions Network was born. We're a multi-professional network that gives a voice to all psychological practitioners who work with NHS patients. By working with planners and commissioners, we help raise awareness of how psychological approaches can improve patient care. We also provide a destination that anyone can come to for advice and support about the psychological professions. It's our mission to make sure everyone knows how important psychological health and well-being is in our day-to-day lives, especially in the NHS. For instance, did you know 1 in 5 older people are affected by depression, rising to 40% when living in a care home? 1 in 4 adults will experience at least one diagnosable mental health problem in any given year, and 1 in 10 children, aged 5 to 16. Or did you know that during pregnancy and the first year after childbirth, 1 in 5 mothers will experience depression or anxiety, and that half of all mental health problems have been established by the age of 14. Stigma and old-fashioned ideas are still holding back care, but it doesn't have to be this way. We want to prove how much healthier everyone can be if psychological professionals are involved at the right time. We're working to make sure everyone understands the dual importance of physical and mental health and the relationship between the two, and to help patients have choice and take more control over their psychological treatments. As well as giving advice and sharing ideas through our members, we help clinical research get put into practice and champion clinical excellence. We're also helping to create the next generation of NHS leaders. We support research and innovation, influence health strategy and policy, promote psychological well-being for everyone across all sections of society, including more marginalised groups, create links with academic institutions and professional bodies, work together in co-production with experts by experience, and promote new ways of learning. Over time, as the network grows, it will respond to ideas and interest from all kinds of places. Becoming a member gets you access to all these things. In the future, in every new healthcare situation, we want people to ask, how do psychological approaches play a role? And know that our knowledge and skills are available for anyone that needs them. You'll find more about what we do, as well as our busy calendar of events, discussions and consultations, on our website. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter.
We've got 7 regional networks. We're one of those 7 networks in the Midlands, and then there's a small national team as well. So overall, the PPN is a very small team. And just to delve a little bit deeper into what we do, our work is shaped by the aspirations of the NHS long-term plan and the 5 strategic priorities of the workforce plan. So we work to support the ongoing transformation in psychological healthcare, and there really has been unprecedented growth ambitions, with the aim being to grow the number of psychological professions in the NHS by 65% from the baseline in 2019. And I think we've actually achieved that. So between 2019 to 2024, there's been that expansion within the NHS, and there's due to be a further expansion of pretty much doubling again over the next 12 years. So we support we support the development and communications of career paths and further development opportunities for all of the psychological professions, particularly around, for example, the new apprenticeship routes into roles. And as highlighted in the video, equality, diversity and inclusivity are really core values within our work. We work to undertake a range of activities that promote these values. In particular, we run initiatives to support the profession to be more representative, to reflect the population that the NHS serves. And then in terms of leadership, I've mentioned about the presence of the National Clinical Lead. We're also working with colleagues across integrated care systems in the Midlands to ensure that there's the right regional leadership and also the right local leadership within each NHS trust. So you might be aware of a leadership role called the Chief Psychological Professions Officer, that's CPPO, who are kind of at the top of the leadership pyramid within NHS trusts. So this again is a relatively new development within the NHS landscape, within the psychological professions. So we're supporting with that sort of transformation. And finally, with the broader kind of transformation priority, we're looking to support this in various ways, and developing and maintaining communities of practice is a prime example, I guess, for of relevance to you. And again, I'll touch on that again in a moment. So communities of practice, what are they? If you've not heard of them before, they are a method of sharing knowledge and ideas. And basically, it's a space for a group of people with a shared identity or a shared kind of purpose or scope to come together and learn from each other. And really, it's about creating that kind of doing and learning environment for people to come away from a COP meeting with new information, feeling inspired, feeling as though they've been able to learn from other people in the room who are in a similar position to them. So on the next slide, we have our communities of practice that we currently have running. So we have one for the Chief Psychological Professions Officers. We have one for practitioners who are working within NHS healthcare. And that's a distinct grouping of professional, which I'll touch on shortly. We have one for psychological practice in physical healthcare. We have one for a new role called the Clinical Associate in Psychology. And then of particular interest to you, I guess, would be the Assistant Psychologist and Student Psychologist community of practice, which we're due to launch before the end of this year. So that's before the end of 2024. On this slide, I've just put the vision statements, which kind of connect through with the priorities that we talked through earlier. And I guess the primary thing to pick up here is that ultimately we want to see NHS healthcare that is completely psychologically informed, with psychological practice being at the heart of healthcare. And when you think about this, it's a real paradigm shift away from mental health care and physical healthcare being seen as very distinct from one another. So what we want to see is that seamless integration of these areas. And this is wider than growing a workforce of psychological professionals. It's also about upskilling other healthcare professionals, whether that's nurses, healthcare assistants, occupational therapists, or GPs, to deliver healthcare in a psychologically informed way. So I'll briefly touch on who we are. We have a very small team of part-time staff. So our chair, Sunny Calcililico, is the CPPO for Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Trust. She's also the lead for the integrated care system in Birmingham and Solihull. And like many other PPN chairs, she wears a lot of different hats. So she's only with us for around about a day a week. I work 2.5 days a week, and we have some limited support from an assistant psychologist and a project officer, and also experts by experience who support us in various ways with the work that we do. So we make sure that all of our work is influenced by experts by experience who can help us properly shape that work so that it is very patient-centered. As you can see, the Midlands region is huge. It's the largest of the 7 regional patches in England, with a lot of integrated care systems. We've got 11 integrated care systems. So these are the regional structures through which healthcare is kind of commissioned and organised within the NHS. We work with over 40 NHS trusts and over 100 higher education institutions that deliver psychological professional training within the Midlands region. So it is a massive area, and we try and maintain our kind of intelligence of what's happening where across the Midlands. As I've touched on previously, there is significant aspiration to expand and transform psychological healthcare in the NHS, and this includes developing the current workforce with upskilling training. So I mentioned that, trying to get nurses, doctors, GPs, occupational therapists, all of those different roles more psychologically informed. but also diversifying routes into the psychological professions themselves, such as through apprenticeships, and then developing new routes into NHS practice for established professions, such as those working as counsellors or therapists. And also of particular importance and significance is the establishment of new roles. And that is what I'm going to focus on particularly today. So on the PPN website, we have a careers map, and this shows many of the new psychological professional roles. We're currently at a position where we've got these three broad groupings of professional role, and then 20 plus individual and distinct roles within that map. And there are some roles that are kind of slightly kind of outliers for various reasons within the psychological professions taxonomy. But in terms of looking at the careers map on our website in more detail, you can click on your current qualification to see what roles might be available to you. And you can also, view each role on the map just to see what's required and how you can work towards them. So there's various ways you can use the map, and it is just one of a number of different resources that we can signpost you to find out more about careers within the psychological professions. I'll tell you about the other ones shortly. So I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the three broad categories of psychological professionals, starting with psychological practitioners. And these were first introduced into the NHS in 2008. And this was the first role of the psychological wellbeing practitioner, PWP. And it was introduced when the NHS Talking Therapies programme was introduced. And at that time, it was called IAPT, Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. Bit of a strange name for the overall thing, hence the rebranding of it being called NHS Talking Therapies. So practitioners within this grouping will usually have a degree to demonstrate academic skills, but also some relevant experience. And the exact requirements really depends on the NHS organisation that are employing the post. Training programmes usually last about 12 months with trainees employed by an NHS organisation in supervised practice. The route into practitioner roles is through trainee or apprenticeship posts that are made available within the NHS organisations that are employing them. And the aspiration longer term is for all of these roles, practitioner roles, to be registered. Some of them currently are, and they're registered by the BPS or the BABCP. So currently we have 4 roles active across the Midlands. That's the psychological wellbeing practitioner, the mental health and wellbeing practitioner, the children's wellbeing practitioner, and the education mental health practitioner. There is a 5th role, which is called the youth intensive psychological practitioner, still in pilot phase in the south. But that is looking to be a new role that will be introduced into the taxonomy as we move forward. So those are psychological wellbeing, psychological practitioners. You can see some links there on that slide. So psychological therapists, this grouping is slightly more complicated, particularly when we're looking at counselling roles, because to be employed as a counsellor within the NHS, you need to have completed a degree that's recognised by the British Psychological Society, and you'll need to be registered with a body accredited by the Standards Authority. For specific psychological therapist roles, it would be really helpful for you to have a look at the careers map, because it is a very complicated kind of landscape there. The roles require further specialist training, in addition to the accredited counselling degree and appropriate experience. Career routes are generally quite are less clear due to there being a number of membership bodies and accredited registers, and careers progression that's got a lot of different routes. So a piece of work that's been done to try and bring these together more coherently is a project called Scopehead. So there's a link on this slide to a document that they produced, which just tries to bring some kind of equivalence together between the different accrediting organisations, and gives some further clarity around the different kind of accrediting requirements for each of those different bodies. And there's also another piece of work that's due to be later by NHS England later in 2024, which will clarify the recognised registers that psychological professionals working in the NHS need to be on. Again, this slide deck and the links on it will be shared, so you'll have those. Third grouping then of those three broad groups is that of psychologists, and for many people entering psychology, that is where they aspire to end up. But I really think given the breadth of new roles that are emerging within NHS healthcare, it's worth considering whether one of the other roles might be where you might be best placed to aim for. Again, given the high competition to get into psychology roles, into clinical psychology roles, other roles do provide lots of additional opportunity for working as a practitioner. So anyway, psychologists include clinical, counselling, forensic, and health psychologists within NHS care. There are other psychologists roles outside of that which don't sit within healthcare. And each of these has different entry requirements and routes into training, which can be quite varied. So looking at the PPN Careers map and also the Health Careers websites would be beneficial if you are determined to work towards a career as a psychologist. So psychologists are registered with the Health and Care Professions Council, which is the statutory register for all psychologists working in clinical practice, and also for some therapists, for some therapy roles. HCPC registration is required. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit about this fairly new role as well, the Clinical Associates in Psychology role, which I think has been around since 2019. So this has currently got an apprenticeship route which lasts 18 months, leading to a master's qualification. Now, clinical associates in psychology, or CAPS, work with specific populations such as children and young people's services, or adult mental health services, depending on the area that the CAP has been trained in. And they support people who've got long-standing and complex problems using psychological theory and evidence to find the best interventions to meet their needs. There's also a strong element of service evaluation and research associated with the role. It is quite closely aligned with clinical psychologists. It kind of, I guess, bridges a bit of a gap between, the assistant psychology role and the clinical psychology role. But to apply, you need to have an accredited degree recognised by the BPS or have completed a conversion course. And actually, I didn't mention on the previous slide, but that stands for counsellors who want to work within the NHS as well. If they don't have a BPS accredited degree, there is a conversion to get into the right registration. So the registration for CAPS is the BPS Wider Workforce Register. So I mentioned before that there are some other alternative websites to the PPN Careers map and the resources that we have on our website. The primary public-facing website for NHS Careers is the NHS Health Careers website, which is linked in the slide deck. There's a section on there that is specific to the psychological professions, and some of the new roles now appear on that website, and different roles can be explored in a bit more depth. Now, you may be aware that Health Education England merged with NHS England and NHS Digital in 2023, I think. So there are some legacy pages on their website that are specific to psychological professions, which includes some relevant information about funding. I think those are still being sort of transitioned into being NHS England web pages, but have still got references to Health Education England here and there. We have produced in the Midlands a specific careers guide for the Midlands area, which would be beneficial for you if you need some careers information. So you'll find a link to that in the slide deck. It's on our resources pages on the website. And I guess finally, I'll end just by encouraging you all to join up to our network. It's a free network, so why not become a member? It helps you to stay informed through our regular bulletin. So we currently send out a bulletin every 2 weeks with key information on training, funding, careers and development opportunities. You can join our communities of practice and become involved with other groups and events that we hold, and generally connect with other psychological professionals across the Midlands and across England. So that's the sales pitch for joining up to our network. As things stand, we have over 2,500 members in the Midlands. We've produced a lot of bulletins. We've held a lot of events. We provide what we refer to as critical friend responses. So as mainly, it used to be called the Ask Sunny Corner. So Sunny Calsililico, our chair, deals with a lot of professional inquiries from CPPOs and others across the Midlands who need guidance and support around different areas of growth within the transformation agenda. So I'm just coming up to the end of my 30 minutes. Thank you very much for listening. Our contact details are there, so please reach out to us if you do need to get in touch, and join our network, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much.